Robert M. Levy. I'm chairman of the Moore County Board of Education. On behalf of our superintendent, Dr. Tim Locklear, and our entire Moore County Schools staff, our Board of Education would like to welcome you to Pinecrest High School and the R.E. Lee Auditorium. We thank the Public School Forum for sponsoring this debate. We also thank both candidates and our moderators for bringing to Moore County a discussion of the many crucial issues that concern the Office of the State Superintendent of Public Instruction and the significant role that the State Superintendent plays on our Council of State. Thank you to all our guests for attending, and our program will begin in just a couple of seconds. Thank you.
Thank you, and good evening, and welcome to the State Superintendent Candidate Debate. We are grateful to Moore County Public Schools and the Moore County Board of Education for providing us with the opportunity to be here with each of you. We are pleased to be at Pinecrest High School in the Robert E. Lee Auditorium, which is named for the long-serving superintendent who helped to desegregate Moore County schools. We also continue to have the families, children, educators, and communities in Western North Carolina in our thoughts. These very special communities and local public schools are working tirelessly to recover, and our support is with them every day. I am Dr. Mary Ann Wolf, the President and Executive Director of the Public School Forum of North Carolina. The Public School Forum is a nonpartisan, nearly 40-year-old organization that works to ensure that every child in North Carolina has access to a high-quality, equitable education. Our organization was formed and continues to strive to bring together education, community, and business to work toward that mission. As I look around this room, even as we are here for a political debate, I know that this enormous turnout is because each of you, students, educators, parents, business leaders, community members, and elected officials, is here because you care about kids. You care about families, you care about local public schools, and you care about North Carolina. Public schools prepare children for life with dedicated educators who support our students to reach their full potential. And we know that policies, funding, and leadership all play a significant role in ensuring that our schools are strong and ready to do this critical work. We have often said that education is on the ballot in North Carolina this year, and the race for the office of State Superintendent certainly exemplifies that. Tonight, we are pleased to have John Hood and Senator Leslie Winter, two leaders in our state who serve as co-chairs of the North Carolina Leadership Forum, with us to moderate this debate. They both come to us with decades of experience and a passion for North Carolina and education. They have worked together to pre-plan the debate questions, including integrating questions from you to maximize our hour together so that you can learn more about the candidates, Mo Green and Michelle Morrow, for this very important office for North Carolina and our local public schools. As someone who ran for office and served as a local school board member in North Carolina, I know what it takes to run for elected office. And we appreciate that these two candidates have prioritized being here with us. Our intent is for you to have the opportunity to learn about the candidates, their plans, and what their leadership will mean for our great state. John and Leslie, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Leslie Winter, and I'm going to start out by explaining to you the format that we're going to use that was agreed to by the candidates. First, we're going to start with each candidate given an opening statement, which we determined the order of by flipping a coin, and the first statement will be given by Michelle. Then John and I will ask questions which we have written together, and in writing them, we took into account the questions that you and the audience submitted about things what you are interested in. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer, and we'll alternate who goes first. And the person who went first will have 1 minute to respond. So there'll be about 5 minutes for each question. At the end, each candidate will have 3 minutes to give a closing statement.
We're delighted to see so many of you here. Thank you for coming. Thank you for those of you who submitted questions. Now, just to be clear, in addition to our live audience, many people will be watching this debate on television. In order to ensure fairness to them and to our candidates, we must ask that you not react with applause or any other interruptions during the debate itself. There will be an opportunity for you to express your support for your candidates at the end of the event. Now it's time for our opening statements, and we'll start with Michelle.
Thank you. I greatly appreciate everyone who collaborated to make this event happen, and especially to you all who've taken time out of your busy days to come and to listen. It is very clear from the outpouring of interest how important this race is and how important education is to every person in North Carolina. It truly does not matter your race, your religion, or your politics. Every person in our state is concerned that our children are not getting the quality education that they need in order to be successful. I think everyone longs to return to the time when our schools were places of hope and opportunity, when teachers and parents worked together to ensure that every student excelled. We all want our young people to have the work ethic, the intellect, and the life skills to be successful, and I truly believe that we can make this a reality. That's why I'm running to be the next state superintendent of public instruction. I know the changes that North Carolina families want in education. I've spoken before countless school boards and legislative committees. I've been fighting to get boys out of girls' sports. I've been fighting to ensure that every child is getting a quality education. I want to ensure that no child leaves elementary school before they have mastered reading, writing, and math. It is not okay for us to be passing our children along year after year when they do not have the skills to be successful. I want to ensure that our schools become the safest buildings in the state. I do not believe that if our staff and our students feel unsafe, that learning is able to happen. And I also want to make sure that we break down the educational industrial complex where people have gotten wealthy and they've gotten powerful off of the failure of our students. So it is time to focus our money and our time on the students and ensure that the system is serving them, not the other way around.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thanks to everyone for coming out this evening. Thanks to the sponsor, Public School Forum, for hosting this conversation about public education. So I'll talk about three things this evening as we begin: experience, vision, and soul. Experience. The position of State Superintendent of Public Instruction is the Chief Administrative Officer for public schools for the state of North Carolina. It oversees 2,500 plus schools, 1.4 million students, a budget of $11 billion annually. Certainly my experience of having been the superintendent of Guilford County Schools for 7.5 years, along with having been the deputy superintendent and general counsel, prepare me well for this role. Number two, vision. The vision that I offer, if I'm elected as the next state superintendent of public instruction, is one that we utilized when I was superintendent of Guilford County Schools for 7.5 years. It is, to use a quote from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., intelligence plus character, that is the goal of true education, and to combine it with a focus on excellence. That vision, along with the incredible work that was done by educators and parents and community and certainly our students, led us to a dramatic increase in graduation rates, at the same time improved student outcomes academically, and the district was recognized as a national district of character. And then finally, soul. The very soul of public education is on the ballot this November, and it is going to take champions of public education to meet this moment. We can look at everything from funding, for example, where we're spiraling downwards, now 48th in the entire country with regards to the funding that is provided to our public schools compared to the rest of the nation. And then we can also look at things like the level of respect or disrespect shown to our public school educators and the system itself. And so I do believe that this is an opportunity for us to elect someone who can, number one, be sure that we sustain and protect our public school system, but then go much further, execute on a bold vision going forward. Thanks much.
Let's not have any applause until the end of the debate.
Several people in the audience have asked about teacher burnout and attrition. North Carolina school districts opened this year with over 3,000 teacher vacancies. In addition, our school districts hired over 5,000 teachers who were not fully licensed this year. This means that tens of thousands of students started the year in classrooms with either no permanent teacher or with a new unlicensed teacher. What would be your goal for closing that gap in the next 4 years, and what would you do to make that happen? Michelle?
The first thing we need to ensure is that our teachers are supported and that they are safe. What I'm hearing as I've traveled across the state of North Carolina is our teachers feel like they have no support in the classroom. They are expected to be handling situations that really should be falling onto our administrators. I think it's interesting that we recognize that 20 years ago is about the time that my opponent ended up entering into the school system. And at that time, there was a 2 or 3 year wait list in many of our districts for teachers. So what has gone wrong? Ladies and gentlemen, I submit to you that what has gone wrong is there is no more character inside of our schools. We are not holding our children accountable. We are not holding our parents accountable, and there is a breakdown within our schools. It's time for us to ensure that every student is safe, that we bring back discipline and respect, that we bring back order, that we train up our teachers so that they have the skills and the tools they need to be able to manage a classroom. And when something becomes unmanageable, that our administrators are the ones that step in and handle that situation. I think you can agree with me. It is not fair for students in a classroom, 25, 24 students, to not get a quality education because just 1 or 2 is not able to behave. It's time for us to ensure that every student and every teacher is protected inside the classroom as well as out, and that's one of the reasons why I've put as the top priority that we're going to make our schools the safest buildings in the state. It's time for us to help our children to understand that they are responsible for themselves. They need to have consequences for actions. We need to teach them how to redirect themselves, and we need to prepare them to be critical thinkers and able to handle conflict resolution and able to be the adults in the room when they graduate.
Mo?
Great. So I will lift up 4 things. 1, compensation. 2, compensation-related things. Certainly working conditions, and then leadership. So one of the primary reasons that we are losing teachers and not able to then recruit additional teachers is because the compensation level is too low. Let's be abundantly clear. North Carolina now finds itself spiraling towards the very bottom with overall funding for our school system, but it also then impacts what we are able to pay our teachers. So one of the things that I'll be advocating for is additional compensation for our educators. Secondly, compensation-related activities. So here, what I'll be advocating for is that we work with local communities to develop strategies that may be helpful to educators. For example, things like housing allowances for our teachers, things like child care allowances for our teachers. Third, working conditions. One of the things that the teacher working condition survey shows, for example, is that over 90+% of our teachers do find that where they work is a wonderful place to grow and learn, but there is certainly work that needs to be done there. We are putting far too much on each and every one of our teachers to the point that it is becoming too much of a burden for them. So we've got to do things like figure out how to lower class size. We've got to figure out how to take some of those responsibilities that we call upon our teachers to do and give them to other folks as well. And then finally, leadership. Leadership matters. So here, we've got to be sure that we've got the kind of leaders leading our schools such that our educators will actually want to work there. I hear time and again that makes a tremendous difference in who shows up and wants to work for a particular school at a particular time.
Thank you. Michelle, do you want your 1 minute rebuttal?
Certainly. I absolutely believe that we need to pay our teachers more. And this is why we need to prioritize all spending to start actually in the classroom with student needs. My opponent likes to talk about fully funding the system. I want to fully fund the students and all of the teachers and the boots on the ground staff. And we need to break down all of the funneling of funds that is going into the bureaucracy. It's going into these administrative roles that do not have a direct impact on our students' academic performance, their character development, or their career preparedness. I want everyone to know too, 1,500 teachers last year were assaulted on the job. We don't have to ask ourselves, would you want to go to work every day if you're going to be disrespected, cursed at, threatened, and even attacked? We must get respect, discipline, and a code of conduct into every one of our schools, and we will draw back in all of the wonderful teachers, and they will be able to do their calling, which is actually teaching our children.
All right, our next question will be directed first to Mo. Legislative leaders and current Superintendent Catherine Truitt point to recent increases in early grade reading scores as evidence that the Science of Reading bill passed in 2021 is bearing fruit. Do you agree with this assessment? What more needs to be done to increase reading proficiency?
Great. So certainly I do agree with the early returns and do believe that this is a potential way forward for us in the entire state. So let me back up and be sure that folks understand the Science of Reading is a way of teaching early literacy skills. I actually served on a implementation team with Catherine Truitt that worked on this for North Carolina. We were working with 5 other states on how best to implement the early literacy skills. Now, what else needs to be done? We absolutely need to be sure that we are providing the level of professional development for each and every one of our teachers in the early grades so that they are equipped to provide this instruction to each of our students. We also, though, need to think about our middle schools. For example, we have lots of struggling readers that are now in our middle schools, and so these very same skills, I believe, need to be taught there as well. Now, what comes with this is a need, and you heard my opponent talk about fully funding. It requires resources, professional development opportunities for our teachers to get the kind of resources necessary to do this. When you compare us to the rest of the nation, nationally, $16,000 per pupil. Virginia is over $14,000 per pupil. South Carolina is over $15,000 per pupil. North Carolina is over $11,000 per pupil. This is a real significant difference when you're talking about 1.4 million students. We need to have that kind of increase in resources to provide the kind of services for our students, including professional development for our teachers, so that they can effectively implement the Science of Reading.
Michelle?
I absolutely am thankful that we've gone back to the Science of Reading and phonics and not whole word instruction, because it's clear, even by what my opponent just shared, that we have middle schoolers that are not reading at a grade level above 3rd grade. And that is a travesty, and we are doing a horrible disservice to our students. I also believe that it's time for us to focus all of our professional training, even after people have graduated with an education degree, on practical skills of teaching literacy in math and in reading. The other thing that I would like to do is I think we need to be diagnosing things earlier on. I actually had the pleasure of speaking with Dr. Conway down in Florida, who has a program called the Now Project, and he has been incredibly successful in helping to determine even children as young as 4. We know that dyslexia and dysgraphia and many of the other literacy issues that our children are facing actually have a genetic component, and he has a very easy test and an assessment that can be done even within the pediatrician's office. But I think it's very important that we as the DPI are offering those services. We can even put them into our central offices so that during the summertime, our youngest students entering kindergarten, 1st and 2nd grade, we can know before they even enter into the classroom what their needs might be, so that we can equip the teachers. I also think we need to be working with those that are working at educating our teachers, so that they can be sure that everyone that graduates with an education degree is able to handle learning differences. They're able to handle our exceptional learners as well well as our ESL students. It's time for us to understand that we are not getting fewer students that have these needs. We actually have increased students that are finding themselves with learning differences, and it is our job to make sure they get the services and be as successful as possible.
Very good. So I'd like to lift up two additional points, one of which I was building on before, which is funding. So a lot of the work that was done for us to implement the science of reading actually used federal dollars. Those dollars are in many ways going away, but this is the kind of thing that those federal dollars, if we can continue to get them, will make a huge benefit or difference for our students. Second, engagement of students. So one of the things that we absolutely must do, in addition to being sure that we teach those skills, is provide them with the kind of materials that will engage them. Students will perform better when they see themselves in the materials that's being presented to them.
Now we're going to turn to career readiness. And our question for you is, please explain what you see as the role of K-12 education in enabling students to thrive in North Carolina's workplace of the future. Michelle?
It is our responsibility to ensure that every student is able to fulfill their potential and able to enter into the workforce, able to pursue a career that's going to make them not only financially independent, but is going to be able to be something that's rewarding to them and to give back to their community. I have had the absolute pleasure of traveling around the state and going to 5 different career and technical programs, and there are some wonderful things happening. I really believe, and I will be fighting to ensure that every junior and senior in North Carolina has the opportunity for an internship, a work-study program. I think that this would help to keep many of our young people in the classroom, and they will even understand what the importance is of all the things that they've been learning in their core classes. I truly believe that every student is born that is unique and has gifts and talents. And it really should be the school system's job to work with parents to uncover that purpose, to uncover that uniqueness, to uncover that passion. And I would like to see by the time our students are in middle school that we are encouraging them on a pathway of success. I want to increase the private and public partnerships that we have. We have a very diverse state. You can be anything that you want to be in North Carolina. And it's time for us to be working with those businesses in the different districts so that they can be preparing the next workers that they're going to need, the next leaders that we're going to need. And I think that we know that the basis of economic performance and economic strength in any county is going to be the quality of education and the students that we are graduating. It is so important that our children graduate with hope and with purpose and with promise and with the skill set, the intellect, and the work ethic that they need in order to make sure that we stay safe and prosperous as free as a state.
Mo?
Thank you. So all along, you'll start to hear things that will suggest that there's one person who's actually walked the walk and a person who only can simply talk the talk. Let me give you an example. This is so critically important for us to know that, yes, we absolutely should be preparing our students for whatever they're going to do work-wise. And in my case, we actually created, for example, 2 STEM-related schools during my tenure: science, technology, engineering, and math. One that was focused on a need in Guilford County, which was for more nurses, and so our students could graduate with a certificate in certified nursing assistant, certification, if you will. Secondly, the school that we created at the STEM Early College at North Carolina A&T allowed our students to really explore lots of different areas in those disciplines. And the school has been recognized even this past year as the 2nd best high school in the state of North Carolina by the U.S. News and World Report. So absolutely we need to then also create more of these opportunities. We absolutely need to have more partnerships with our community to be sure that we are in fact providing the kind of services that our community needs and where they think they want to go with various industries, and that our students are well prepared to make that happen. So what we also did in Guilford County Schools is we said not only do we want to increase the number of students who are taking career and technical education courses, we absolutely also want to increase the number of students who are taking and passing college level courses while still in high school so that they can make whatever decision they want to make when they graduate from high school.
Michelle, 1 minute.
You know, my opponent would have you believe that he is just now stepping out of the superintendent's role in Guilford County, but the fact of the matter is that was 8 years ago. And ladies and gentlemen, I think experience is only a positive when you've been successful. If you look at the standards right now and what's happening in Guilford County schools and Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools, they have some of the lowest proficiency rates in math and reading across all demographics. They also are one of the most violent and crime-ridden systems in our state. It's important, experience, but I think one of my greatest qualifications is I have no experience in a failing system that chooses to continue to fund failures and only wants to get more money for those people at the top that are the bureaucrats like my opponent who's gotten wealthy and powerful off the backs of our students and our teachers.
All right, I'm going to ask the next question. We've already had a couple of mentions about school funding, so I'm going to ask a more general question about that. North Carolina currently ranks below the national average in public spending per student on elementary and secondary schools. Is that a problem? And if so, what should the General Assembly do to address it? I'll ask Mo first.
Yes, sir. This is an absolute problem. It is perhaps the biggest problem that we have facing our public schools. And I'm not typically one that likes to always lift up funding, but we've reached a point where this is the issue. As I said earlier, we're 48th in the country with regards to our public education funding compared to the rest of the nation. We are finding ourselves at the very bottom at the same time that our North Carolina can actually afford to do more. What should a General Assembly do? I believe the first thing the General Assembly needs to do is prioritize what is actually required in our Constitution, which is to fund our public school system. So our General Assembly has chosen, for example, most recently, tried to put $463 million extra into the taxpayer-funded private school voucher program. This is allowing then folks to make that choice to go to private school, and it's allowing now the wealthiest of the wealthy, who may already have their child in a private school, to remain there. At the same time that our students in our public schools desperately need those resources. So the General Assembly, I think, needs to come back to what they are required to do, which is to provide a sound basic education for all of our students in our public schools first.
Michelle? Let's hold off on the applause until the end of the debate, please. Michelle.
I absolutely believe that money matters, but I think what matters more is how we're spending it. So as superintendent, I will do an audit. I will start with the DPI because we have nearly tripled the number of directorships. We have seen people in administrative roles getting 60 and 65% raises when our teachers have gotten a measly 2 or 3% raise. I do believe that money matters. But we could drop $1 million in every first grade classroom, ladies and gentlemen. We could do that this week. And our children will not know how to read, and they won't know how to count it. It's so important that we make sure that our funding and our spending and the decisions that we're making are first focused on student success. They're on scholastics. You know, I also want to audit the individual districts. But we also need to audit programs because there's an awful lot of programs, there's a lot of directors, a lot of people that we are paying, and they do not have a direct positive impact on our students' learning. Understand, only 1 out of 3 of our students in the state of North Carolina is reading or performing math at grade level. This is a crisis situation. It's time for us to buckle down and get back to the basics of education. And it has to happen in elementary school. We all know the statistics that if a student does not read beyond the third grade level, they are destined for not fulfilling their potential. And many of you might not know this, 70% of those individuals that find themselves in prison today don't read beyond a fourth grade level. We have got to focus our time, our talents, and our resources on our youngest students to ensure that they are mastering reading, writing, and math before they leave elementary school.
Mo, 1 minute.
Yes, so certainly I do believe that our General Assembly needs to come back into session, just as they did for trying to increase the amount of money that goes into the taxpayer-funded voucher bill. But they need to come back into session for another reason. That is, they could have taken $463 million and increased the teacher pay. So it's $60 million or so for 1% increase in teacher pay. Can you imagine then if we had increased teacher pay by 7+%? The things that begins to do is it begins to transform our system. Absolutely, we need to find now, because the federal dollars are going away, to do things for like our early literacy skills. We need them to come back into session to provide additional resources for professional development so that we can do more early literacy skill professional development for our teachers. These are the reasons our General Assembly needs to come back into session. This is what they need to be focused on going forward.
All right, Michelle, what parameters, if any, should there be for the use of suspension as a disciplinary measure in K-12 schools?
Thank you. I really think it's important that we have a code of conduct that each one of our individual districts can adopt. It's important that our staff, our students, and our parents know what is expected of everyone when they walk through the doors of a school. It's also going to be important that they know what the consequences will be, so that they do not feel that they are being singled out for any reason whatsoever. I really think that the goal needs to be, it's not going to be about punitive issues. It's going to be how can we redirect students? Because what we're doing is we're actually training them to be able to handle difficulties, to be able to be in a situation with people that are different from them and have different views and goals. That's what our end goal needs to be, that everyone ends up being able to handle the circumstances in the classroom. So I think the parameters need to be, definitely we can give them an idea of this is what the code of conduct should be, but we need to hold them accountable. And as I stated previously, it needs to be the administrator's #1 role to create a culture of civility and respect and unity and excellence. We must raise our bar of expectation, and I truly believe our students will meet that expectation. We need to expect greatness and for them to do hard things, because life is hard. And I remind you, we are not raising up children, we are raising future adults. And we need the leaders, the entrepreneurs, the inventors, we need the parents, we need the tradesmen. We need the future people to be able to handle difficulty. And that's why we must ensure that we have places of civility and respect and discipline that our students can learn and our teachers can teach, and everyone is excited to get there in the morning.
Okay, Mo, 1 minute. No, you have 2 minutes. I've lost my place, sorry. 2 minutes on what should be the parameters on the use of suspension as a disciplinary measure.
So suspension should be part of a comprehensive system for working with our students on various issues related to character and performance in schools. So let's think about this comprehensive picture, if you will. Many of our students are struggling with lots of issues, and so I do believe that we need to be sure that we have the kind of mental health professionals that can work with our students. Folks like our school psychologists and counselors and social workers as examples. We are significantly out of whack with regards to what many folks would say we should have as far as ratios in these areas. I'll give you an example. School psychologists. The ratio should be about 1 to 500. We're at about 1 to 1,800, just as one example. Now, as part of this comprehensive system, then we also need to have character development. We need to be sure that we are teaching our students exactly how they should behave and comport themselves and do it in a positive way, not just in a suspension or punitive manner. And then third, certainly there should be this focus on, well, if you do certain actions, absolutely there are consequences for it. Now, suspensions become real challenging, though, because in our state, and we're not unique in this regard, we actually suspend certain of our students far more than other students. Take, for example, African American males that we suspend multiple times over white males for exactly the same offense. And so part of what we've got to do is, if we're going to use this as a disciplinary tool, we've got to be sure that it's done in a fair and equitable manner across all sorts of demographics. That is part of then a comprehensive system. And again, I'll share that we certainly tried to focus on that in Guilford County Schools, and we're able then to have schools be safer while also decreasing the number of students being suspended out of school.
I absolutely think that we should suspend students if they cannot behave and they are impeding the other students in the classroom, their learning. I do not agree that we should be determining who gets suspended by the color of their skin. I think that it has to be, justice is blind and balanced, and if all of our students understand what the issue is, you might not know this, but restorative justice, of which my opponent is a proponent, has actually limited the number of suspensions that can happen according to the student's race, and that needs to stop. We cannot allow our students to have different levels of behavioral expectations, and it's time for us to understand that if our students are not safe, if there's not order in the classroom, that learning is not happening.
Let's talk some more about school safety, and in particular, in your view, should we rely more on school resource officers to promote safety and security in our public schools? And what else is needed to keep our schools safe? Mo?
Great. So this is, again, part of a comprehensive system of safety. I certainly think that school resource officers and an effective relationship with school resource officers is necessary. However, as part of a comprehensive system, I'd actually start again with being sure that we have the level of mental health professionals working with our students. If we can increase those numbers to even come close to the recommended ratios, for example, I do believe that we'll have more students who will be able to engage appropriately in a school environment. Certainly then, we absolutely need to have school resource officers, but I would prioritize mental health professionals above school resource officers, and I would do it in the following way. School resource officers have a critical part to play, but they should not be involved in many of the day-to-day things that we get them involved in. Those should be left to our school administrators and our other educators in our building. We also then need to certainly do things like have, for more safety in our schools, think about things like hardening our facilities. For example, doing things that will make it much more difficult for folks to enter into our facilities, double entries, if you will. Things like metal detectors for folks when they enter into the buildings, cameras in certain locations. And then finally, I do believe that we need to focus on character development, teaching our young people how to comport themselves, how to be in relationship with each other, even when they're in disagreement with each other. I believe those things, along with many other parts of a comprehensive safety plan, will allow us to have safe schools.
When I'm superintendent, I am going to have a statewide student resource officer program so that we can ensure that every school has at least 2 officers in it. You know, it's important for you guys to recognize that when I first won the primary back in March, I created a school safety advisory council, and that was to with professionals, not just from North Carolina, but from around the country, that we can find the best practices in other schools, in other systems, so that we can ensure that our schools are safe. But you know, my opponent said that the violence and the crime and the drug use, that it's a false narrative. And in fact, when he was the executive director of Z. Smith Reynolds, which is what he just left rather than the superintendent's role, he worked with groups called the Education Justice Alliance as well as Building Peace. And those two organizations have made it their goal to remove all student resource officers from our schools. So he can stand here right now and tell you how he wants to make our schools safe, but that's not true. He believes that our children should be allowed to have counseling sessions and be diagnosed and talk to doctors without parents' knowledge. I'm a nurse, I've been one for 31 years, and I absolutely disagree that the school has the right to make medical decisions for our students. I believe that if a student is suffering, whether it's intellectually, emotionally, socially, that the entire family is impacted. And while we play a huge role, our teachers and our staff, in determining when someone is having an issue, the first call needs to be to the parents. We should not be diagnosing, treating, or counseling our students without parental involvement.
All right. Let's have a 1-minute rebuttal.
Great, thank you. First of all, to start off with law enforcement, let's be abundantly clear. When I was the deputy superintendent of Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools, we had our own law enforcement division. That division reported directly to me. We upgraded what we were trying to do in law enforcement. So I absolutely in support of law enforcement having a role in keeping our schools safe. Now, let's be real clear about who talks about safety. And in this instance, let's be sure that we look at what her actual rhetoric is. She's the one that actually calls for people to be executed when she doesn't believe them. This is the person.
Stop.
We can't hear if you clap.
This is the person who has called for the public execution of Barack Obama. When you talk about safety, you talk about vulnerable communities. One of those would be our LGBTQ community. The plus, she says, now includes pedophilia, which is a false narrative. That community no longer feels safe when you have someone like that suggesting that kind of rhetoric.
All right.
Well, don't I get to rebut?
That was a rebuttal.
Oh, that was the rebuttal?
You can use your next space to talk.
Perfect.
I'm going to remind the audience that if you cheer for your candidate, the time that your candidate can't talk because you're cheering counts as their time. So be quiet. This is tape. We're going to tape it out. We need you to respect both candidates. All right, we're going to move on to charter schools. Michelle,
Yes.
Charter schools and school board operated schools are all public schools, but they are regulated in very different ways, with charter schools having considerably more operating and budget flexibility. Do you recommend changing this, and if so, how?
Well, I absolutely believe that charter schools are essential, especially given the fact that we have almost 800 failing schools in the state of North Carolina. So I ask you this question. If you have your student and he's being bullied, he or she is not getting the education that they need, and you are in one of the 37 districts that have no charter school, do you think it's fair to leave a child in a school where they're not getting their needs met? This is the reality of what so many parents are facing. And we have to ask ourselves this question: why is it that there are 250,000 families who have fled the system? Why is it that there are so many people on a waiting list to get their child an opportunity scholarship or a voucher? I absolutely believe that if any school is receiving public funding, if they're receiving our tax money, that they should be held to the same standard, 100%. But what we need to recognize is that is not a reality when we have almost 800 public schools that are struggling. It's time for us to make the public school system be the absolute best option that it can be. And we will draw back those teachers, but I believe in the free market system. I believe that healthy competition gives you the best product at the best price. And so I see that charter schools have actually raised the bar for us in the traditional public school setting, and we need to be working together. We need to be focusing on what is the end goal. The end goal of all of our public school system is that every student is successful as they walk across that stage. We need to be working together and not pitting ourselves against one another in this system. And that's what I hope to do as superintendent, to build some bridges and to make our public school system, whether it's charter or traditional, be the absolute best option for all.
Great. Do you mind repeating the question again?
Sure. Charter schools and school board operated schools are all public schools, but they are regulated in very different ways, with charter schools having considerably more operating and budget flexibility. Do you recommend changing this, and if so, how?
Great. So, first of all, I do believe that charter schools have an important role to play in our overall public school system. I actually was in support of charter schools when they first started, and there was a cap of 100 in place. I'm not in favor of the cap being completely removed for charter schools because I do believe that that has limited our ability to hold them accountable. The charter schools, and the reason that I was in favor of them is because of just that. We allow then charter schools to have some level of flexibility, the ability to innovate, and we can find out then what is working or maybe being a detriment to our public schools that we can say to our traditional public schools, maybe we thought this was a good rule, but maybe it's not a good rule. Maybe it's actually limiting our ability to perform the way we want to. And in fact, again, walking the walk, we actually used a charter school as a model to start a public school in Guilford County Schools. We utilized the KIPP Academy system of charter schools along with a private school, the Ron Clark Academy, to start a middle school preparatory academy in our public schools. And so this is, I think, the way that we ought to be thinking about our charter schools. They can be places of innovation. We also, though, need to be sure that they don't become places of limitation or segregation in ways that don't follow the law. And so there are things that we need to be sure that we definitely address as we think about our charter schools. Are they, for example, providing meals for our students? Because if they're not, they may limit the number of students who are able to attend those schools. Are they providing transportation? If they're not, they might limit the number of students who are able to attend those schools. So those are the sorts of things that we ought to focus on as we deal with charter schools.
You have 1 minute.
I'm good.
All right. Let's talk about the role of the state superintendent itself. The General Assembly has the biggest role for determining K-12 education policy and funding. What are the most important roles of the state superintendent of public instruction? If you were elected to this office, how would you allocate your time among these roles? We'll start with you.
Great. So I believe that there are two important roles for the state superintendent in public instruction. One is to be the chief administrative officer for public schools. The second is to be the chief advocacy officer for public schools. So let me unpack both of those. The chief administrative officer is in charge of certainly working with about 1,000 employees in the Department of Public Instruction, leading and guiding their work around any number of things, including helping to implement the standard course of study, implement the assessments that are provided, the accountability model that is put in place currently by the General Assembly, working hand in hand with the Department of Public Instruction, the State Department of Education, certainly licensing our educators as well. So massive, massive job, if you will. Also then we'll be guiding and leading our 2,500 plus schools. Then the chief advocacy officer, I think, is critically important as well. This is, I like to say, the position that when no other position will stand up for public schools, this is the one that stands up for public schools. So, for example, when you're talking about the taxpayer-funded private school voucher program, whatever anyone else wants to do, this is the position that must say, yeah, but. We need those dollars in our public schools, no matter what I might think in a personal capacity about, sure, it'd be great for having competition and all these other things. Our public schools need those resources. How will I allocate my time? So it's going to vary. There will be certainly times when I'll be spending an inordinate amount of time being sure that we get the systems in place administratively so that our schools can function and and move forward. But I'll have to spend also an inordinate amount of time on advocating for our public schools that desperately need, in this moment, additional resources to work effectively.
Michelle.
You know, our Constitution gives the General Assembly as well as the State Board of Education and the Superintendent the awesome task of ensuring that every student gets a sound basic education in North Carolina. And while the General Assembly is the one that sets the law, the State Board of Education is the one that sets policy, it is the Department of Public Instruction under the leadership of the Superintendent that sets those standards, that has the professional development, that is going to be ensuring that our students are safe and that every district gets what they need, and really is going to be the go-between between the General Assembly when there is a need. I believe that the first thing that we need to do is we've got to build some bridges. We seem to be fighting against one another. It's the General Assembly against the State Board of Education, against the Department of Public Instruction, and what we really need to focus on is the students, the staff, and the individual schools. I would like to see a lot more communication, a lot more collaboration between the 8 different regions that we are divided up into. I think that everybody needs a seat at the table. I think we've got to go to our educators and ask them what they need, how we can be better serving them. We need to look at places that are actually being very successful. There are some incredible programs that are going on, people that have lifted themselves out of a failing school system, and we need to partner those districts with other districts that find themselves in a difficult position. It's going to be very important to be communicating. It's going to be important to be listening. It's going to be important that we put our students, our teachers, and the boots on the ground staff at the forefront of every decision we're making, whether it's financial, whether it's the curriculum that we're choosing, whether it's our hiring standards and our licensing practices, whatever it might be, our safety and code of conduct. It is important that we work as a team so that everyone across the state, every student in North Carolina, regardless of what zip code they live in, should be getting an excellent education.
Mo, would you like a 1-minute rebuttal?
Thank you. So as I talk about this position, it's important to understand that you need to have someone in this position who actually does believe in our public schools, does not call them things like indoctrination centers, does not call them absolute cesspools of evil, lies, and deception, that does not say that they've been taken over by Satan. This is a position that you need someone who says, yeah, there's work to be done. There absolutely is work and reforms that must happen, but we must do it in the context of how do we move our district forward. We don't need to have someone who's allied with Mark Robinson, for example, who calls our educators wicked people. That does not move our districts forward, does not move our schools forward, will not move the state of public education forward. That, I believe, is important for this role of State Superintendent of Public Instruction.
Okay, we have time for one quick follow-up question. So we're going to give you each 1 minute to answer this question, and we're going to start with Michelle.
Sure.
The state superintendent has a unique opportunity to influence the General Assembly's decisions about education. If you are elected, what recommendations concerning education will you make to the General Assembly in 2025?
Well, I have had the privilege of the last 5 years actually working with those in the education committees, both on the Senate and in the House. And we have been fighting, as I stated before, to get boys out of girls' sports, to focus on academics rather than political and social activism. I think we do need an excellence in education bill that is going to prevent our students from being used and used in the way that they have been in the past. It's really important that we recognize that what we really need to focus on is how our students are doing. If you can honestly tell me that our students are happier, healthier, and better adjusted and better prepared for the future as an adult, then I would say don't change a thing. But I know that that is not true, and I know that everyone around the state understands that that's not true. It's time for us to focus on students first and stop talking about a system. The system exists to serve the students. So do I believe in the system? No, I believe in our students. And I believe in giving them the best future absolutely possible.
So I'll focus on funding issues when the General Assembly comes back into session, so that we can focus on things like teacher compensation. I believe my opponent and I both have agreed over many debates that we need to increase the compensation for our teachers. So this would be a place that I'd love for us to have some conversation about. I also believe that we need to think about other legislation that would move issues around academics forward, trying to provide more resources for things like career and technical education opportunities. I mentioned earlier about the early literacy skills and the need for resources to provide professional development for our teachers now that federal dollars are essentially going away. Those would be among the issues that I would be focused on if and when I have the conversation to talk to the General Assembly.
Thank you. All right, that concludes the question and answer segment. Now we're going to move on to closing statements. Each candidate will have 3 minutes. And Michelle, you go first.
Thank you so much. I greatly appreciate and I understand that this is a great honor. It's also a great responsibility to be the candidate for the next Superintendent of Public Instruction. I truly believe that education is the great opportunity maker. It is what lifts families and entire communities out of poverty. It is what is going to prepare the next leaders that we need in order to ensure that we stay at the forefront economically as a state. I am speaking for everyone that has left the system, because there are a lot of people that have left because they have been browbeaten, they've been silenced, they've been forced into compliance, and they do not feel that they can any longer be in a system where they are not able to do what they're called to do. I believe teaching is a calling, just like nursing. I believe that when I was teaching biology, chemistry, civics, and Spanish to high schoolers who had chosen to leave the system, their parents had taken them out because it was not serving them, I believe that I have a very great idea of how we can move forward. My kids have been in public, private, and they've been homeschooled. And I think every single one of those systems has something to offer. But I truly believe that the direction that we go in education is determining the direction of us as a state, and it's determining the direction of us as a nation. And North Carolina right now is at the heart of this debate. It was in 1978 when Jimmy Carter created the U.S. Department of Education. And do you know that at that time, the United States was number 2 in the nation for our public school system? We look just 45, 46 years later, and we are 43rd. There is no reason in 2024 and 2025 why every student is not equipped for excellence to reach their fullest potential. But we are passing people along. We are choosing to focus on political and social activism rather than academic excellence. We are telling our students that their character, that their future is determined by the color of their skin, and nothing could be further from the truth. It's time for us to bring hope and purpose back into our school system. It's time for us to encourage our students that they can succeed. We need to bring back that statement that used to be talked about a lot, that here in the United States, if you work hard, and if you're honest, and if you're perseverant, you can do anything, you can be anything. I think that is the hope, that is the promise, that is what we want to tell every single student in North Carolina, and I think we can do it. I think that together we can ensure that our students are safe, and we can ensure that our public school system is the best in the nation and an example for everyone else to follow.
Mo.
Thank you so much for giving me this wonderful opportunity to address you this evening. Thanks for all that you are doing on behalf of public education in the state of North Carolina. I will lift up 3 points. Again, experience, belief, and character. There's going to be, as I said, one person who has walked the walk and one who simply talks the talk. You're talking about someone who has been the superintendent of Guilford County Schools, the third largest district in the state of North Carolina. Improved academic outcomes, things like raise the ACT scores, things like increase the number of students who took and passed college level courses while still in high school, increase the number of students who took and passed career and technical education courses. Under the old accountability metrics, we had the most low performing schools in the entire state of North Carolina. We're able to remove all of those schools from low performance status under that old accountability metrics, while also then increasing graduation rates and also becoming a national district of character. Also then creating things like STEM schools, like a parent academy, like even establishing and creating a scholarship endowment fund for graduates of Guilford County Schools, as opposed to my opponent who homeschools her students. Nothing against homeschooling, but you're talking about a massive educational opportunity that we're being asked to take on, right? Secondly, and one thing I will say is I have waited patiently through all of the debates for her to give any evidence that what she's done when she talks about teaching has actually resulted in any positive improvements for any child or any outcome. You've never heard it. Second thing, let's talk about belief. My wife and I, we're blessed to have 2 children. We put our children in our public schools because we believed in them, and they delivered for our children as they did for many others. Certainly there are those that we did not get it done for, and we absolutely must do more work in that regard for those students and families as well. But I believe we start from a place of, yes, this is a good and sound system. How do we make it better? As opposed to, you've already heard what I've suggested, or what she's actually said. I'm not suggesting it. These are her actual words about her belief in our public schools. And then third and finally, let's talk about character. You heard what we tried to do when we made Guilford County Schools a national district of character. This person, my opponent, took her own children to the attempted insurrection on January 6th, comes back from the insurrection and puts her own cell phone video calling for setting aside the U.S. Constitution, calling on the Insurrection Act. This is a person who's called for the executions of many that she doesn't believe in. This is the kind of character. You can go to abcmorrow.com, every letter, look it up yourself. You'll see what kind of character you'll find with my opponent. That's the distinction between me and my opponent. Thank you so much.
We were 1 minute over.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much to each of you for joining us and taking the time to learn about the candidates' plans for education, local public schools, and children across North Carolina. Thank you to John Hood and Senator Leslie Winter for your thoughtful facilitation of the debate. And thank you to Mo Green and Michelle Morrow for providing the opportunity for us to learn more about you and your plans for North Carolina's local public schools and our children. The recording of tonight's debate will be available to share in its entirety by Friday, and it will also run on our Education Matters program over the next 2 weeks on WRAL, Fox 50, and the UNC TV North Carolina channel. We hope you will share that widely, and we are grateful that you took the time to learn with us. Thank you so much, Moore County, and good night.